ABCs of Faith in Bayshore Church, and starting this new series. Glad that you're with us today. Want to talk about A is for altar, and here we have the altar at the front of Bayshore Church. There's some debate about whether this should actually be called an altar or not. It's certainly the focal point of our church, right in the center, and where our attention is drawn. So what's the deal with altars? Well, altars go way back to the Bible times, and we find altars popping up all over the place in the scriptures. Noah had an altar, Abraham built altars. At first, altars were a place for offering, this kind of threshold place between the divine and the human, between heaven and earth, sacred and profane, that it's kind of where they met. And an altar was this place where people made their offerings to God. And often that would be some kind of a sacrifice, maybe an animal or the first fruits of their labors, of something that they had grown. And it was thought with many cultures in that time that you would burn your offerings, that there would be the smoke would carry its way up into the heavens, and that the gods were pleased by that. And that's certainly true by what we find in the Old Testament, that God is pleased by the smell, the scent of these prayers with these offerings ascending to heaven. And so over time, as they developed the temple, there were two main altars in the temple. One for incense, again, that sweet smell. I always like to think in our altar that we put flowers up here often, that the sweet smell of the roses and the flowers that we have are symbolic of that, without having to light anything on fire, cause asthma problems, breathing problems. And so so there's that incense altar, and then there was kind of the altar where the sacrifices were made and burned, and the bloodletted of the animals. It was always an idea that those offerings were that and sacrifices that people made their own behalf to show that God was first in their lives, that their money, their possessions, their livestock, their livelihood, that they trusted God to provide. And so altars were built in remote places when they didn't have anything, and then became more elaborate as time went on. As the church came into being, the altar became associated with the sacrifice of Jesus, and the cross kind of symbolizes a nod to that, and it became associated with this offering and this holy meal of communion. And for a long time, the service was all about communion, not about hearing the word of God or the liturgy or anything like that. It was about communion. And for a while, the priests would do their thing at the altar, and their backs would be to the congregation, and it would just be before the priests. And then over time, the altars got moved out more to the center, where people could get around it, and it was thought more of as a table, the communion table of the Lord. And we do have our communion table that we bring out, is that's symbolizing of that, us all being gathered around it. And so altars have this kind of threshold between the sacred and profane, between God and us, and they remind us of the holiness that's around us all of the time, to look for God's imprint on all of creation. There's this beautiful poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. It says, "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes, the rest sit round it and pluck blueberries and daub their natural faces unaware. Do you see God's presence in the blueberries, in the things that are around you? So our altar is the focus of our sacred spot. It reminds us that this is a sacred place for us, this sanctuary. And you can build your own altars, maybe a shelf at home you dedicate to God, or the things that are holy and sacred in your life that remind you of your blessing. Our altar here is a place of our offerings, where we bring our offerings forward even to this day, to remind us that we rely on God and trust in God through all our days. So A is for altar. We'll see you next time.